Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to House General and Housing. And today is Wednesday, well into February 4, 2026. We have a long day today, and I'm just going to very quickly go over what we're going to do. We have two sets of testimony that involve DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. We're hearing from them first because they are one of our budget assignments. So they're one of our budget assignments. So we'll have time again to hear from them, but this is the first round of what's in the budget, how do they feel about it, what do they really care about? Like, should VHIP continue forever and ever to be year by year or what? Okay, so that's one thing. Another is the committee has expressed interest in hearing how VHIP is going and are there issues with VHIP? Okay, then at nominally at 9:30, we're shifting to Act to 775, which is the Rural Finance Bill. And Alex and two other witnesses are testifying, beginning testimony on that bill. The DHCD is involved because, as you remember, there is a proposal in the bill to allow DHCD to advance money in VHIP rather than when they deem it appropriate. It gives them the discretion to advance money rather than act on a reinforcement basis. So then we're going to have, still this morning at 11 o'clock, our counsel, Cameron Wood, will come in to begin the first discussion and markup on 775. With that, Alex, you want to tell us your name, direct it, and take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development. It's to be in a familiar place. What I'd like to do today is start with VHIP. I know there's a lot of familiarity with VHIP in this committee. So I've dropped some paperwork on your desks, beginning with what should be a familiar handout for all of you. I put this on your desks a few times every year, and it's essentially just an update. Statistics on VHIP, where we're at, how things are going.
Do you want to do this? Do you have slides or do you not? Just want to do.
Would you like me to pull it up on Zoom? I'm happy to do that if that's easier.
Well, I think that it might be a good idea so that those who are Gail and Saudia, who are attending via Zoom, can see them, and also anybody who's watching it. I think it's worth it.
Mr. Chair, if you want to test my technical prowess, I'll meet the challenge.
Does he have the link? Okay.
So why don't I start while I'm pulling this up, just by discussing the budget. So in the governor's budget, there is a request for $4 million for VHIP base funding. You heard this from us last year that we've been running VHIP off of various tranches of one-time funding. We've been able to make it work because the funding was so large and we were able to get limited service positions to band-aid this thing together and make it work. It's, I'd say, largely been proven to be a tremendous success, and I'd say both the administration, stakeholders, legislators, communities feel that VHIP ought to be a permanent presence, a permanent tool in the toolbox. I'm vamping while I wait for the link. What I'm getting at, one-time funding, even if we were to get one-time funding this year, VHIP would end. The staff that runs VHIP in our department, the staff that runs VHIP in the home ownership centers, largely have just been strung out to this point because they had terms that end this year, and we were able to piece together funding. Without base funding, VHIP will end. So $4 million goes a long way to keep an important tool in the toolbox.
Alex, what was the amount last year?
4 million at one time.
4 million also?
That's right.
Okay, so it's level funding.
It would
Entirely aside from the one time versus
That's
versus
right.
permanent, it's level funding.
It would be. And it makes a big difference, one time versus base, especially this time. The limited service employees that operate it, their terms
Do
expire.
you just offer them contracts or you essentially convert their position?
Can't without permanent funding support.
No, with permanent funding.
With permanent funding, you're then able to take admin dollars, then position pool and joint fiscal are able to say, basically we have to demonstrate that we have permanent funding, and then they can authorize, we'd have to ask them, but they can then authorize permanent positions. So base funding is the path to that.
Can you remind me how many FTEs we have needs as a program?
We run it in-house with 2 FTEs. And those teams those 2 are stretched to the max.
Yeah.
And they're limited service positions.
They are currently.
Debbie?
Well, I know that, I think it's VHIP that got a grant, like in St. Johnsbury, I think there was a grant used to help people get into housing. Would the way we fund VHIP, would that grant be like not usable, or we wouldn't be able to get grants of that nature?
You know, I'm not sure which grant you might be referring to.
I'm sure it's not.
We remember we looked at those houses in St.
Yeah.
Johnsbury and they had grants to pay the rent.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, the tenants of vouchers.
Okay, then.
Yes, yes, so the design of the program by using fair market rents, very much relies on a robust voucher program. That does nothing to fund the construction of the units. I do want to go back just on staffing and the capacity. We are able to do this with only 2 people because the home ownership centers take on a tremendous amount, and they have been excellent partners. I can't stress enough how great the partnership's been. This wouldn't have happened to them. All right, so what you're seeing here is, again, a very familiar dashboard. You're looking at nearly 1,200 units that have been funded with VHIP, averaging around $40,000 an award. Property owners are bringing in at least that much into every project. There's substantial amount of capital back from that. As a reminder, I'm going to flip through this so you can just see all the iterations of VHIP. VHIP 2.0, where we began offering a 5-year or the 10-year, VHIP 1.0, which was still ARPA and then state revenue replacement dollars. And then going all the way back, some folks may remember there was RHRP, Rehousing Recovery Program. This was using CARES Act dollars. This was before VHIP was in statute, before VHIP was really a program. This was the first attempt at VHIP. The reason I'm bringing this up today is because these are the first units, essentially VHIP units, even though it wasn't VHIP yet, that have begun to come off of their 5-year terms. We've had, we've had nearly 60 units finish their 5-year term or are about to. So we've received data back from these folks as to what they intend to do once they are no longer subjected to the covenant. And so I'm going to show you the very first look at data. You've been hoping for this data for a while, so I'm going to show you what we're initially seeing as to the intentions. We're asking these folks, what do you intend to do with these units once you're no longer bound by this covenant? And we had long theorized, based on our engagement with landlord, that this is actually creating bonds with these tenants, with the coordinated entry folks, and it's enabling folks who never would have thought they'd want to be tenants for certain low income populations to remain landlords to these folks and keep renting at fair market rents. And the data is showing that at least so far, is true. So of the nearly 60 folks so far who are going to wrap up their 5-year covenants, 56 of them, 93%, are going to keep charging fair market rents. Yeah.
How does your office perform like the outreach and how do you get this information?
That's a great
Like
question.
you're just asking people, excuse me, what are your plans?
When they come to us to release the covenant on their property, which they have to come to us to do, so we can.
Okay.
We then say, we'd be happy to. We can't hold them hostage, but we can say, we love it if while we're doing that, you can fill out this form.
I see.
That's now gonna be part of our annual recertification process, so that we're constantly getting feedback. Are folks staying in these units? Are you keeping the same tenant all 5 or 10 years?
Is when you say fair market rent, you mean HUD fair market rent,
At fair market rent,
right?
that's right.
Okay,
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Has anyone ever said, no, I'm not gonna give you this information?
This no is
Um,
no or left blank. I believe that's one person who just did not answer. So it's not that they said, no, I'm not going to keep this on the market. They declined to answer.
Gotcha.
And we still have to release their covenant. We can't force them. But 3 units, the unit is going to stay on the market, but the rent is going to increase above HUD fair market rents. Just so you know, the makeup of that, you can see, a handful of them were serving folks exiting homelessness, not a tremendous number. Again, seems like not everybody answered this portion of the survey. Many, but many were not using vouchers, so we designed the program so that vouchers can be used, but only a handful of folks, less than 10, were using vouchers. Again, many folks didn't, you can see by the numbers here, didn't respond to this portion of the question. This is really the data that we are after here. Are you sticking with HUD fair market rents?
yes, go ahead.
All right, do you have a sense of whether the property owners like sort of felt that they needed to answer in a certain way, or was it clearly was this like, just how was it presented, right? Like the survey as just like, we're just trying to track things.
It's a good question, right? Did they feel compelled to?
Yeah.
I could bring in the team to give more details about how they did the outreach. I would offer that it was very clear that we were going to release the covenant no matter what.
Yes,
So I'm a little bit confused about the timing of that because the program was started in 2020, right? Originally. Right?
Yeah,
And so the subscribers to that original program would have taken some time to complete their updates or construction. So how, and the requirement is that they keep it at the
HUD.
HUD rate, fair market rate for 5 years, right?
that's right. During the life.
And so, as it is now 2026, are we talking about people who were immediate subscribers to the program? Who only now have had people in those units for 5 years?
Mhm.
What's the number of those?
It would be 50, I think it's 59 or 60. It was on,
56 units. And that was,
well,
Well,
the total is 60 units.
those are all by 60 separate owners or?
Not necessarily 60 units, but some of them, some owners may have multiple units.
Is there any way to know how many owners were surveyed in this survey?
I could get that data.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I was showing there is the timeline. Why don't I just do a little? So this is, you can just see the period of when these covenants have been done. So the project completed, some of the lease up, that's when their clock starts. And so you can see essentially when their 5 or 10 year clock starts.
why do you think such a huge majority intended to keep going as they were? Do you think it's because they have tenants that are stable and just want to keep the stability? What do you think it is? It's a little surprising, you have to admit. So given the forces in the market over the last 5 years.
I'm not entirely surprised. Turnover is expensive with a rental unit. The nature of the way these folks are paired with landlords isn't necessarily the way it would always happen. Granted, if you keep in mind, this is our HR piece, so it operated a little bit differently, so not everybody's coming from coordinated entry, but it was all 5-year. So, it's a little more structure around how these folks are getting to the units, so. I'm not entirely surprised. I'll also offer that in some parts of the state, HUD fair market rents aren't that much lower than what they could get market rate.
Right.
So they may just feel that if they've got a happy tenant, stick with them. I think what you hear from most landlords is that's the case. There's probably more detriment and cost to upping rent by 5 or 10% than losing somebody and having to turn it over, losing a few months worth of rent. All right, anything else on VHIP before I move on?
Any questions by the committee on sort of where VHIP is?
No, just,
Sorry, you go ahead, I'll go after.
I just want to reiterate, so for the committee, so. You're asked base funding. So that it's not this not knowing and for the employees too, like, so we just know this is a program that's gonna exist and.
And so we can lock in long-term, more stable grant agreements with our homeownership centers. I mean, God bless them, they put up with significant changes in our grant agreements because the funding sources have changed, the amounts have changed, the admin cuts have changed. This gives everyone more predictability, and it means that VHIP can just be a tool that's out there in the market and applicants have more predictability. I can't tell you how many of you have emailed me. I'm hearing from a constituent that they're no longer accepting VHIP applications because it's oversubscribed. I mean, the number of legislators in this building that send me those emails every month, it's true. So if we can give the market some predictability so people keep using it, I think everybody.
Well, I certainly support that.
Yeah, well, Leonora, and did you have a?
Yeah, I just really wanted to clarify, because I think we were trying to like get you connected and, your spiel about like why base funding we can't do another one time if we want the program to continue. Why were we able to do one at a time until now? Just clarify.
Because there was some substantial funding, we could, the tranches of the appropriations we were getting were 10 million at a time. Enough that we could kind of make it work. But the other really important piece is when this all started, across the enterprise, a substantial number of limited service positions were allocated because we had ARPA funds. So under ARPA, our team was able to receive substantial number of positions for our little tiny department. And we used those limited service positions, which are authorized under ARPA, to administer this program. All ARPA positions have to end by the end of this year. That's federal timeline. And there's really no chance of getting new limited service positions. If we have base funding, permanent funding, we then have a chance to go and seek from what's called a position pool, permanent positions to keep this program running.
Among an experienced pool of staff.
Right. Yeah, well, that's right. Well, the positions are shared from a pool, but the staff the position has to be advertised. So the staff that's currently working on the program could apply and I think would likely be good fits for those positions, but it's.
Sorry, really quick, when you say end of this year, do you mean fiscal year or do you mean calendar year?
Good question, calendar year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good clarification.
Yes, Elizabeth.
A few questions about VHIP.
Yeah.
We put into our law that we wanted to set aside funding for updates to units that would allow additional funding for updates to units that would allow for people to create accessibility where none previously existed. And I see in your 2025 VHIP resources for property owners that that's not even included. So it didn't, can you just give an update on that program and exactly where we are on this day with regards to that program?
Yeah, it's been included in everything that property owners get.
But it's not in this guide at all.
It's on the website. In many cases, not many, in multiple cases, a property owner has initially opted to take the 20,000 bonus and then ended up declining because the improvements so far exceeded the $20,000 bonus that they actually decided not to do. And the reason in most cases
Thank you.
that's what happens, because when VHIP is renovating an existing building, particularly a historic building, the biggest constraint ends up being hallway width. And to start moving walls becomes a dramatically more costly project. And so
Why?
if we have a builder here,
Because builders don't work for free. It costs about $1 a minute for a carpenter, once you add all of the benefits and everything else to it.
And just so,
And figuring out structural walls versus other walls, and once you have to move a structural wall.
and do you think that as a builder, do you think that universal design might help with that scenario?
I think in some situations, if you have one unit on the second floor of a building that is not going to have a lift or a 3-mile ramp, no.
Well,
But if there is a unit suitable, it's an option. I think it is an option that's a viable option.
Well, go ahead, but I want to keep this to questions for the witness.
I am, so I'm just going,
Yeah, okay.
so, when I last talked to, both you and Mr. Gilpin about this, the last status update that I received about it was that it was impossible for people to be able to access that extra pool of money because, there was no actual definition of, accessibility or visibility. Has that changed in the last 2 years?
I don't know about impossible. There were language changes that passed last year to give a little bit more clarity to
Where,
in the statute.
in which statute?
There was a series of changes that were negotiated to this VHIP statute. Some included, say, the 30% set aside for units for folks exiting homelessness, and a couple small clarifications around the accessibility language were included in that. That was either last session or the session. Well, it must have been last session, as Chair Mahali was here. If you would like, I think Mr. Gilpin is probably more appropriate to give more detail.
You know, we have a series of witnesses coming next week on disability, and I think it would be really good to have as complete a report as you can produce on exactly what the status, what
Mr. Gilpin has been invited for next week.
next week.
Right.
I think we need as complete a report as can be produced on the fate of the 20,000 extra and how many units of all the units have incorporated either some or all necessary for either universal design, however that's defined or thought of, or actual, accessibility.
I think that's certainly something that we can come back with. Sean can dig up that data to specifically number of units.
Gail,
Thank you.
you have your hand up.
Hi. Alex, thanks. I was wondering, since it's one-time funding, is it more difficult to staff because those positions essentially are temporary positions?
That's a much more articulate way of saying what I attempted to say. It's hard to give anyone reassurance with a
Okay.
temporary position.
I do, Gail, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I do have a question. So is the 4 million total, that's the total amount necessary that includes permanent staffing, but also grants? Or is there, isn't that less than in past years?
If the question is what's the total demand in the market, it would be substantially higher.
Yeah, but isn't 4 million less than you got in prior year?
It is. In other years with the one time we received it, I believe the biggest appropriation we received was 10 million. There may.
Is that because of ARPA money?
We did receive 15, yes, with ARPA, and then we received, in one of the budgets, there was actually a transfer from BHCB to us. So that year in total, we got 15 million. That's right.
Okay. So do you have a sense with 4 million? Are we talking about, I mean, you're saying you're not meeting the market, but are you meeting a tiny fraction of the market? Are you meeting much of it, most of it? Do you have any sense of that?
Boy, with 4 million a year, I suspect there would still be, and the homeownership centers may have an interesting take on this as well, especially Cornerstone, they have tremendous uptake, but there will still be a backlog of applications. We likely produce with 4 million a year, I guess in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 units per year.
Chris, but I'll have you identify yourself, but you're Chris Donnelly. Are you act as a home ownership center here? Is that correct?
Chris Donnelly with the Champlain Housing Trust. Yes,
Do you have any sense of backlog and what you need, whether this 4 million, is it really underfunding? Is it kind of okay? Is it, do you have any sense of
I
that?
don't have a sense of the backlog. I do know when we have resources, people access them.
Yeah,
So there's no lack of need right now.
okay. I think, any last questions?
Just
Yes.
very quickly, and this funding, does it go to does it tend to go to small property owners?
That's a great question.
Like, what kind of units are we talking about? And so we kind of get the sense of.
Yeah, it's been a good mix. I mean, there have been a couple instances where there's been a larger building rehab, say, 6 or 8 units, something like that, and a property owner has accessed that. The vast majority, and again, I can ask the team to give sort of a project makeup, but the vast majority are small. ADU has been a decent portion of these up to, 3 or 4 unit. And the reason we like that sweet spot so much is actually grades perfectly with our broader initiatives to expand this universe of who's doing the building. So if you think about our 802 Homes initiative as part of our broader overall, we're trying to get more people into small scale. And we're targeting that 1 to 4 unit. VHIP just pairs perfectly with that. So as these folks come through our training program, maybe utilize the designs through 802 Homes that Chris's team is putting together, they can then go and apply for a VHIP grant. As a reminder, if a building is a new build, there's a cap. VHIP cannot be used if it's more than, I believe it's 6 or 8 units in a building. So if it's a new build, it really can only be the smaller scale. Now, if you're rehabbing, you could apply for more. We really don't tend to give those big projects grants with VHIP. We don't want it to be just another source in the typical funding stack. We want it to be something different. And the homeownership centers in their prioritization of applications have really taken into account. So
One thing you just, one thing you just said confused me, because I thought that VHIP was to sort of revitalize an already existing unit that's fallen into disrepair, but 802 Homes is about new buildings.
you can use VHIP for new build. It isn't the most common use of it because it's only 50K a unit.
Okay.
So the property owner would be putting in a tremendous amount of money. Where it's truly a new unit most often is conversion of a space. So conversion of a space in terms of splitting a single family home into a few or converting it to a
Commercial
space.
to residential.
Exactly.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. So it's a little past 9:30 now, and we're going to move on to H775, which is an act relating to creating tools for housing production. And Alex, would you like to be first on this year, first on the list, and talk about the one element for you is on VHIP, which is the ability to advance funds, and anything else you'd like to say about the bill?
Sure. All right, I'll start with that, and then maybe after hearing Mr. Lubell or Mr. Webster, I may have more to offer later. But why don't I start with the authority to advance funds? To be clear, we do technically have authority to do this if we wanted. We could advance funds. It's not our practice with any of our grant programs. Generally speaking, with public dollars, we like to do things on a reimbursement basis with program updates, check-ins that the homeownership centers do. We do recognize that there may be situations, whether it's manufactured or modular construction, or maybe some other circumstances could arise where there's a compelling reason to advance the funds all at once rather than on a reimbursement basis. So we have no issue with this language. We appreciate that it still gives both the department and homeownership centers discretion to sort of exercise their judgment. So we see no issue with that. Maybe I'll save the broader discussion of the bulk purchasing. If you'll allow Mr. Webster and Mr. LaBelle to go to that, speak to that first, but you know, in broad terms, we're largely trying to support anything that can increase the use of offsite construction. We're supportive of.
Okay. Do we have Jeff LaBelle here? What, Jason is next? So they're both on Zoom. I don't see Jeff. Are they together? Jason's first. Okay. Jason, welcome to House General and Finance. I think you testified before us once before. You're muted, or we can't hear you. Doesn't say you're muted, but we can't hear you. Yeah. Is this on our end or his? Can you talk and see if we hear you?
I don't think you can.
Can you hear us?
Oh, no, we cannot hear you.
He can hear us. We can't hear you. Maybe, do you think you should hop off and hop back on?
Yeah.
How about that?
Oh,
There we go.
All
Great.
right, earbuds.
Yeah.
Earbuds.
I was gonna
Earbuds.
say.
We hear you loud and clear,
Never
Jason.
too.
You want to state your name for the record and take it away?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Jason Webster. I am one of the owners. My brother and I are owners and operators of Huntington Homes, modular manufacturing company located right here in East Montpelier, Vermont. And I thought I would start. I know you've been working on the issue. We've all been working on a housing issue for a while, but I thought I would start with kind of a big picture, just like statement of the problem. And I saw the other day, I saw a chart, a graph that was really helpful for me to see this. And what it was it was on the horizontal axis, and this was for Chittenden County and Addison County. I don't know if you've seen this. On the horizontal axis was incomes, and then on the vertical axis were number of families or number of households in that income bracket. Right. And no surprise, there's a bell curve there, right? There is a section where you have the most amount of families in one income bracket. And this was in Chittenden County and Addison County that I saw. And the bell curve, the number of people in a certain income bracket, you know, the bulk of the people were in an income bracket of $100,000 to $180,000 a year. And once you know somebody's income, when we talk about housing, this is all about affordable housing, right? This is all about what can people, not how many units are being built, but what units are being built that people can afford to live in. And so if we take that income group, the bulk of the people in this group, and we do the math that says, you know, a certain part of your wages should go to housing, we can find that the bulk of the group used to be able to afford construction costs, right? So when we say that $100,000 to $180,000 a year bulk group of income, you know, they could afford houses that were being built at about $175 a square foot, houses that were, in the low 300,000s, plus land. And the $175 a square foot is what builders used to be able to, we used to be able to build for that. Now, and that timing is pre-COVID, so late 2000 teens. As we move through time, the bell curve has not really slid up, right? So the wages have not gone up nearly as much as construction costs. And so now we're you're hearing contractors talk about $400 to $600 a square foot. That has now left, the construction costs have now left the bell curve. It's significantly to the right of the bell curve. And so that bulk of people just can't afford new construction anymore, right? So that's kind of like, it's kind of a statement of the obvious, but where we are today, construction costs are beyond what most people can afford. And this leads me to problem number 2, which is that builders today are still at capacity. Right? You won't find a builder that says, you won't find an electrician, you won't find a plumber, you won't find an HVAC tech, you won't find a single builder that says that they don't have more work than they can do right now. And what that tells me is that we don't have enough builders, and that even though we're beyond the bell curve of what society wants to pay, there are, the bulk of society wants, there are still enough high-end projects to keep all of the builders active, right? And so now we have this public policy question of saying, well, what do we do, right? Now we know the issue, right? We have the issue is that there's nothing being built in a price range that people can afford. And so what do we do? And I think big picture, public policy, your work, every regulation, everything we look at, we need to be figuring out that, the solution to this problem is, one is that we need to slide everybody's incomes up, right? Not their costs, but their incomes, which I think is the goal. But I think more is that public policy needs to figure out how to move the line of construction costs back down to the bell curve of where people's incomes are. And so I think every public policy, every regulation has to come from that viewpoint of which direction are we walking, right? Is this policy walking us towards houses that can be built for less money? To get us closer to where we can afford stuff, or is this policy walking us away from what people can afford, right? So there's I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. That's kind of just my big picture statement of the problem we face today. So I look at the bill at hand, right? Age 775. I think that looking at the individual components of it, right? Like the financing piece of it, where the money is, how it's going to be assigned, really is the administration of it. That's really kind of like out of my wheelhouse. I sit as I'm a builder, not a developer. And so we're the ones, figuring out how do we effectively nail 2x6s together to deliver a product to a client, not necessarily, what's the program and the financing and all that kind of stuff. The one piece so I can't speak as well as Alex and everyone else about the financing piece of it. There is one piece in there though, that I did see that I just want to make, which is the 15% or minimum 2 unit affordable aspect. It's a great policy goal. It's important. I'm not saying it's not. What is important though to know about that is that if I go back to a statement of the problem, we can't build affordable housing market rate today, right? We can't. If you put a client in a room and a builder in a room and we sum up the costs, we can't build that affordable house without some program to buy that cost down. And so we have programs, right? There's the big A affordable programs that are out there that are buying down that cost to close that gap between the construction costs and the bell curve of where people are income wise. And this program, which is geared towards extending housing into more rural communities, I think we can assume that those smaller, more rural projects are probably also less sophisticated. And those developers probably don't bring with them the horsepower or the administration to access the affordable housing programs. And so if they don't bring with them these programs to close that gap, what those individual developers are going to have to do is they're going to have to, within their own project, shift the costs to the other builds in their project, right? So, and I can think of, I have an example of a project we're working in right now where that's exactly the case, right? The developer has not leveraged, he's not partnered, he's not used any of the programs, but the town required a certain proportion or percentage of his units be deeded affordable, and he essentially pushed the costs onto the other units, which if those other units are really high end, well, maybe there's enough room to make that work. But if those units are trying to slide towards that bell curve of what people can afford, and the rest of the units are trying to be more workforce housing, which I think is what the policies are trying to achieve, I'd caution us about that affordable requirement just shifting the burden onto those houses. So there's that part. And then I guess, speaking specifically to the part where I can probably speak the best to is the this idea of a bulk purchase to lower costs. Of course, right? I mean, more of ordering more widgets from a manufacturer is always going to lower costs. The question is that how can a program be designed to actually do that? Going back, I want to kind of like zoom out a little bit as to one of the reasons housing is so expensive right now. One of the reasons housing is so expensive right now is that we as much as we understand it's the right thing to do and it's the way to get to cost effectiveness is through standardization, right? Where we have the same unit built over and over and over, which can lower costs. I don't like to use the example of the car industry, but the car industry, right? Like you don't walk into a Toyota dealership and specify the vehicle. I want this transmission with this engine, with this interior and all that, right? There was a manufacturing company that provided to the dealer the product that they can sell to the client. And that allowed the manufacturer to produce cost efficiently and effectively because they could develop the project, they could develop the product themselves. So when we bring that over to construction, pretty much every house right now that's being built, especially the one-off houses on your lot, which is primarily what we build, small developers, individual clients that come to us for us to come build them a house on their lot, every single one of them is bespoke every time, right? That clients might understand the concept of standardization and lower pricing and that they desire lower pricing, but we always are met with the yeah buts, right? Yeah, but I want this, or yeah, but I'm different, or yeah, but that's not important to me. This is important to me. So when we talk about a bulk order, I think that it's going to be something, I think it unlikely that we're going to have a program that sets up a series of small developers all over the state, and that at any period of time, those developers are going to aggregate an order for 40 of the same house and then shop it around to a manufacturer and say, okay, I have an order of 40, like who's going to build this for me? One is I don't think developers and clients act like that. Not sure that they would ever align like that. And two, I don't know many manufacturers that would just be, all of a sudden that purchase order comes in, and 40 houses is a lot. Like we can build a house in 12 days, but 40 houses is still a lot of them, right? For us, that's still 3 or 4 months worth of work. And I don't know many manufacturers that would just, when that order came in, they would shut down their production line to everything else and say, I'm going to allocate 4 months of work to this bulk order purchase, right? I think a program that would be, and how do I say that? Kind of the same thing said another way. Builders aren't at none of us are at a lack of work right now, right? We all have as much work as we can process right now. I think so we need to, if for a bulk order or something to catch any of our, to be that shiny, flashy thing that catches our attention, where we're competitively going after that, which is going to kind of obvious, which is theoretically going to lower price to consumer, would be a bulk order that is something that is easy for us to process in a time when we're looking to process additional work. And so where I can see it, and this ties into, Jeff's going to talk about the 802 for All program. We have a standardized product line called True Home. I'm actually in the middle of developing another product line right now that I'm kind of calling we're calling it, because we haven't figured out a catchy name for it yet. We're kind of calling it the Vermont series, where, think like Mary Azarian, traditional New England vernacular houses across Vermont, those little kind of capes, colonials, 1-stories, cottages. We're building kind of a standardized package around those houses. I think what would be a more successful program would be if there was a bulk order submitted to a manufacturer to kind of pre-build those things. So more like the car industry, where that product is built in waiting. And then one is it gets us away from the client, budding the design, because it's already, this is something that's already built and it's ready. It's like the existing real estate market. Like, well, if you want to buy that house, that's what it is. Like, if you want it different, but that's what it is. And so it kind of starts to cut out the but customizations. But more importantly for a manufacturing company is it allows any of us to work that production into holes that we have in our manufacturing schedule. And once we can, and if we are all looking forward and we can kind of like fill in those holes that we all see in front of us, right? No matter, all of our companies are very expensive to operate every week, right? We have a very high payroll, we have leases, we have an expensive shop, we have insurances that don't go away. And so all of us, I think, we look at kind of our future order flow, and we kind of like match our production levels so that we can stay busy, right? The last thing we want to do is run ourselves into a wall or off a cliff, right? So we kind of match our production schedules to the workflow that we see which has dips. And so we have to take that into consideration. If a program like this could fill those holes in, that would allow us easier to kind of like set our production levels higher. And then the client can be kind of taking these projects, they can be taking this product out of inventory, as they need it. So we're no longer trying to kind of like align a manufacturing schedule with a developer's schedule, which are two very different things.
You have, Jason, I want to say you've been really clear, I think, and this is very useful. We have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
And then we do want to allow time for the others to testify. You have a question.
I do. I feel like I'm missing something, and I just would like some help understanding, like the DHCD program, which is coming out with the permit ready Act 250 avoidant designs. Couldn't those designs be like?
You mean VCR? Do you mean 802 homes?
The 802 homes.
Yeah, that's VCRD. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about applying the 802 homes catalog catalog.
He's suggesting that. He's suggesting that what he's saying, if I can interpret, is to answer your question. He's saying two important things, really, to the point. One is the bulk ordering isn't going to work if, let's take 40 units. It's not going to work if it's 25 different kinds of houses.
Correct.
It's not going to, well, it'll work, but it just won't reduce prices. And the second is, so it would be much better if it was one type, one variations on types, but all within essentially the same unit without all kinds of customization. And the second thing he's saying is, which is new to me, is he's saying, it's not as if we're going to open up a whole new line and hire a whole bunch of new people to make your order of 40 units, even if they were all the same. What he's saying is it would be better if we knew that that order was there and could depend on it, and then we would just fit it into our schedule. And because it's like his factory is like a machine that costs money every week. So they have to keep it busy. And if they would build up the inventory, and then it would be deliverable to whoever ordered it.
That's correct. So if I knew that, so we as a Vermont, as a manufacturing company in Vermont in construction, we are sort of subject to the same cyclicalness of the building cycle that happens here, right? So when people aren't ordering homes for us to build in January when they know they can't take delivery of it. And so we always have this like logjam of work in June. Things kind of cool off through the summer because people are summering and Lake Champlain's beautiful. And then in the fall it rolls through again, and then it falls off in the winter. And so if we knew we had 40, the winter is what scares me, right? The winter is why I don't sleep. The winter, it's a lot to run this manufacturing company. And so if we knew that we had this order coming in for winter work, that even if we have to put it in our parking lot and wait to deliver it when sites can get ready, that would encourage me to run at a faster pace in the summer, to increase production, to get those houses out of the way so that we could then work at a higher production through the winter as well. Because what happens right now is internally, we're looking at the orders coming in all summer and all fall, and we're looking at which ones can we push into the winter. Like which ones can we push out to make sure that we have year-round work, to make payroll, we provide health insurance to employees, like to do all of that kind of stuff. And so that it kind of keeps like a little bit of a cap on our production level because we don't ever want to run out of work. But if I knew it was there, we would run faster.
Elizabeth, go on.
Well, I guess what I was really asking, I understand what you're saying. That was what I was sort of getting at. I understand what you're saying. That was sort of what I was getting at. And I wondered why we wouldn't just create a plug and play mechanism like that, where when we are looking, when we do, as I was saying to Chair Mahali the other day, when we do actually take a step back and look at what we are thinking about spending our precious treasure on. What are we spending our precious treasure on? And shouldn't we be prioritizing the, not just building more homes, but building more homes for the real need in different areas of our state, including rural areas? And why wouldn't we want to do that quickly and as affordably as possible? So why wouldn't we just try, well, not just, why wouldn't we prioritize creating a kind of plug and play?
Well, I think you're going to hear that from the subsequent witnesses. I mean, I think you're on the right track. Jason, we really should allow the other witnesses time to testify. Is there anything you haven't said that you want to add, or any questions by the committee before we move on?
No, I thank you for your work on this, and I agree that these packages should be geared towards, I mean, I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom, right? I think they should be geared towards the more rural communities because they're experiencing the same construction costs that Chittenden County does, right? The contractor costs are the same. And they really are the ones that are being left behind right now as that work has migrated to these areas, as it's just math, right? Where the work is following the curve of incomes.
Right. I do want to ask you one question because you just said something at the end there. I want to make sure I understand it. I got the point where you said, hey, it costs us X gazillion to run the thing per month. And it's a machine. It just runs and that's what it costs. So we have to fill it up with orders to produce the income. And what you lose sleep over is in the wintertime, we don't always have it. But, so it would sure be nice to be able to fill up the winter with bulk orders.
Correct.
Okay. But I also heard you saying that the size of your overall operation has to match the overall income that you can earn. So in other words, even if you could be bigger in the summer, in the status quo situation, you can't afford to expand to meet summer demand if it means that you have all of those fixed costs eating you alive in the winter. And then if you had more winter orders, you might even be able to redo the math and expand in the summer.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that ideally we want to maintain the same production levels year round because it's an oil tanker that takes a long time to speed up, slow down, and turn.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we want a production level that's year round, and then we will match that with staffing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
Which we now understand it's expensive. I don't want to even know what this meeting costs.
See all this? Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff Lubell, you are next.
Okay, great. Thank you for providing me with an opportunity to speak with you this morning. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, can you, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
We also see the little sidebar if you want us to.
Yeah. I'm trying to change it so I can you can see the whole thing.
That was interesting.
All right. Wonderful. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Jeff Lubell. I am a senior fellow at the Terwilliger Center for Housing at the Urban Land Institute. This is an organization of professionals across the country focused on housing development, and the Terwilliger Center is really trying to expand the supply of housing affordable to people of different incomes around the country. And I also
Where is the Terwilliger Center?
the Terwilliger Center is based in Washington, D.C. It's the Urban Land Institute, though, works nationally, and I work out of my home in Norwich, Vermont. And I also have a consulting group, so I'm doing that part-time. I've been in Vermont for about 18 years. I thought what I would do is really quickly kind of review a little bit of what I said last year, not go into any depth, but just in case it's helpful to have some definitions of terms and a little bit of background, and then switch to really focus on the legislation. And I'll try to do that all within 10 to 15 minutes so we have ample time for questions. As you may recall, I testified last year about a report that had been commissioned by 3 Vermont state agencies that I co-authored with Seth Leonard, focus on ways to use offsite construction to meet Vermont's housing, workforce, and climate goals. And really, that report picked up on a question that the New York Times had asked in this article. Why are we building housing the same way we did 125 years ago? But all these advances in assembly lines and but most homes are still being built, stick by stick. And so that article really urged to focus on offsite construction, and that's something that I've been focused on really as a way to achieve a bunch of different goals that we'll talk about, but mostly a way to lower housing costs and increase the supply of housing. So first, just a little bit of terminology that I think can be helpful, because it's really confusing, but really, very simply, offsite construction is housing that's mainly produced in factories rather than on site. So there can be and often is some work on site, but most of it's done in a factory. And there are basically 4 different kinds. There's
Jeff,
manufactured.
Jeff,
I'm sorry.
just a minute. Members of the committee, watch this and pay attention to these types, because it will be very useful for us in the future to understand the differences in the subsets of this offsite construction. Go ahead, Jeff,
Sure.
because this is
So-
very apropos.
Great. So manufactured housing is housing that is produced and conforms to a national building code called the HUD code. And these are homes that are required currently by law to include a steel chassis. And you're most familiar with them as single wides and double wides, which are a form of home that you often see in special parks. They might call manufactured housing parks, or used to call mobile home parks. We don't like to use that term mobile homes anymore because it typically connotes a low quality of homes, but there's been a lot of improvements in the code, and these homes are quite nice quality homes, and they can also be installed on permanent foundations, as the Vermont State Housing Authority is doing with their mobile home infill program. But as you'll see, there's a high-end version of manufactured housing, and there are some really beautiful homes, and I'll show you some pictures so you can see that it's not just the kind of single wides and double wides. There's really a range of different configurations. So the next type is often called volumetric modular, or really just modular. This is the type Jason was just talking about, Huntington Homes. So this is what they do. And it involves the construction of boxes off-site, and they're called volumetric because they have volume inside, right? They're not just a 2-dimensional panel, but they're a 3-dimensional box. And those are constructed off-site, and they're joined on-site. And depending on the approach, there's a different amount of work that's done on-site to kind of finish them off. And then there's a type called panelized construction, and that's where you're basically building 2-dimensional wall, floor, or ceiling panels. And those can be shipped to the site and constructed on site. And so the building is on site, but most of the assembly has been pre-done, so it can be assembled quite quickly. And then there's also a kind of a number of variations. Kit homes, for example, are really a form of panelized construction that sometimes are intended for the homeowner to even assemble, right, without without a lot of additional work. And you might recall that Sears Homes had a kit home product that they offered that people could order homes, 70 years ago. Could order homes, some beautiful homes built through Sears catalogs. So that's just a little bit of terminology. Here's like some pictures. So you get a little sense. There's a Huntington home in the upper left, in their True Home line, which is one of their more affordable lines. There's a company called New Frameworks that makes smaller homes with compressed straw bale, and that there in the bottom left, and you see kind of a rendering of the interior in the middle. The two homes on the right are both manufactured homes. The upper right is something called a cross mod, which the cross mod is a product that is really trying to fit in to residential neighborhoods. It looks, as you can see, a lot like a conventional, one-story home, and but it's just a lot more affordable. And the bottom right is actually a duplex, so it has two modules that are connected, and both of them are built with a standard roof pitch that looks a lot like site-built homes, and the cross-mod homes actually have access to a preferential financing program from Fannie and Mae and Freddie Mac that are really designed to try to encourage the use of manufactured homes in residential neighborhoods. So some of the benefits, again, I'll go kind of quickly, but I'm happy to go back more slowly, but I want to make sure we get to your bill. But there's a potential for cost savings here. It comes from a shorter timeline. There's less waste. If you really have economies of scale, and Jason was talking a little bit about, what would be needed in his context to do that, and there are a range of different economies of scale, but really it's one of the biggest factors that is driving up housing cost in Vermont is that we really are not building at scale for the most part in Vermont, particularly when it comes to single family and kind of missing middle typologies. If you were to create a plant in Vermont or expand a plant, you would have more jobs. There's a lot of labor shortages that we see in the housing field, particularly of skilled tradespeople. And if you're doing it off-site, there's a way to sort of hire someone year-round rather than trying to find someone for each individual job. So it can be easier to supply that expertise. There's you get buildings done a lot faster, so it can be a good, for example, response to disasters because you can build homes in a week or two. Then you have to install them. So maybe it's a month or two, but it's not, the way it typically takes. And if you specify energy efficient designs, you can achieve your climate goals. And finally, there's a way to streamline the inspection process. If you were to adopt, the kind of the model codes around how modular gets inspected statewide, then there wouldn't be a need for local inspections, and that would streamline things and I think make life a lot easier for the manufacturers. There are some drawbacks and limitations, and one of them is that the potential for cost savings are not always realized. For the most part right now, in this country, we use modular and panelized to build custom construction of high-end homes because that's kind of that's what they pay cash or they have easy access to financing and there's a lot of work that's needed to complete the homes on site and it kind of works for what it does, but it's not meeting the need for lower cost homes. Manufactured housing does have scale and low cost because they're typically built in much larger factories. And so they're buying parts, at greater scale. But right now they're limited to one-story structures. But there are multi-unit structures like duplexes that are now allowed. And actually, as we speak, HUD is in the finishing stages of finalizing a rule that will allow, we think, multi-story manufactured housing structures. And Congress is also contemplating eliminating the chassis requirement, which will, again, make it easier to build multi-story structures with manufactured homes. High upfront costs. So our manufacturers are very vulnerable to housing downturns, much more even than stick-built construction. If you have a construction company and you don't have a plant, you can kind of melt away. People lose their jobs, yes, but which is bad, but you haven't made huge investments in materials and factories the way you have with a an offsite construction plan. And so this is one of the reasons why we've lost capacity in the Northeast. There used to be 8, I understand, 8 volumetric modular plants in northern New England, and now there are 3. There are places where local building codes and design review processes kind of pose obstacles to scale. And this includes differences in how the codes are interpreted. If in Vermont, for example, the larger cities, take over the inspection processes, and they might interpret things differently from the state, and that leads to problems that make it harder to achieve economies of scale. And there could be issues related to labor shortages and public perception. So the report that I mentioned made a number of recommendations, and I'm really pleased to see that there's been progress along many of these dimensions. One was this idea of using bulk purchase guarantees to achieve lower costs. Eventually, the way to achieve the greatest cost savings really is to have very large orders that would allow a plant to expand their capacity on a reliable basis rather than trying to squeeze in a single order. I understand that's something that takes time to get to, but that's where, I would say we want to be heading towards. If we were buying 100 units a year and the manufacturer knew that you were going to do that for several years, then you could add a second shift, you could hire more staff, you could really, think about doing that. And so that may be where we're going, but the current bill is actually a really important step in the right direction towards that, even if it doesn't quite get there yet. The second was to focus on new or expanded factory capacity. There has been, my understanding is there's been work done to really understand the needs of the Fairhaven plant, which is a former manufactured housing plant, to allow it to restart. And so it's great to see that moving forward. There's more that can be done, I'm sure, to really think about ways to use offsite construction as part of the development of apartment complexes. And I am currently in the fundraising stage of trying to raise some money to support a offsite construction working group of northeastern states, which was actually another recommendation in that report. And we will be doing work on both single family and multifamily to really help states learn from each other and really utilize and incorporate best practices to try to lower costs. And so there's a number of really exciting ways to lower multifamily costs. That's not what we're talking about today, but something to think about. And some of the other recommendations were a statewide building code for offsite construction, which.
Jeff, could I interrupt with a question?
Please.
At the end of February, there is a conference of the Council of State Governments, Eastern Regional Branch on Housing. Do you know about that? Will you be there?
I have heard about that. I don't have a plan to be there, but if there were, if you all were interested in talking about a region-wide building code, for the Northeast, or you're interested in talking about statewide building codes or offsite construction, I'd be eager to learn more about it and see whether there might be an opportunity to participate.
Thank you.
Yeah. We talked about pre-approved designs, and which is, again, you'll see part of the demonstration that's being proposed here, and maybe some small grants to help builders and manufacturers adapt. So that's a little bit of background. I'm happy to go into more detail. I just have a few more slides. I wanted to focus a little bit on what's going on with implementation. And here I want to emphasize that there are actually 2 pilot programs that have been proposed that both involve the bulk purchase of homes produced through offsite construction. So there's the one that's in your bill, the Offsite Construction Accelerator Pilot. And then the Vermont State Housing Authority is also planning a program that they're currently tentatively calling Move In Vermont. There had been some other names they had been thinking about, and maybe they'll end up with a different name, but that's their current one. And I'll tell you on the next slide a little bit about that one. There's also in this bill a credit facility, Section 10F, for the purchases of homes produced through offsite construction. And that is a huge step, because one of the biggest challenges with doing offsite construction generally, but particularly thinking about a bulk purchase, is that there's a kind of a revolving need for funding. You need to put a deposit down when you place the order so that the manufacturer can go and order materials and reserve a place in their line. And then, eventually the home gets built and there's a need to to pay the manufacturer, but then the home buyer buys the home. And so you're getting replenished, but there's sort of this extension of credit, temporary extension of credit. And so having a kind of revolving fund that can help you manage that without having to say, we're going to force every single project to apply for a separate construction loan. It's just that it just adds cost and complexity, and this is much simpler. So that would really be fabulous if you're able to kind of move that forward. My understanding is it does not require appropriations. And so part of my big picture message here is that this is really important progress towards implementation of some of these ideas. So let me, if I could, just describe the two pilots as I understand them, and it's certainly, I think Alex is here and can correct me if I am misunderstanding either of these. But so the Offsite Construction Accelerator, as I understand it, it's really built on the foundation of the Department of Housing Community Development's Homes for All initiative. So they are working on a series of home designs that, and they are then going to work to get those designs pre-approved. So they will kind of accelerate the housing development process by identifying these designs that you won't need to go through a separate design review process at the local level. My understanding is that they're focused on what we call missing middle typologies. I don't know if that is a term that you all have used, but it typically is used to define the housing types that fall between single family on the one hand and kind of mid-rise multifamily construction. So that it would include duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, like 4 homes attached to each other. And it includes townhomes, and it might include garden style apartments. But it's this typology that has historical roots throughout the Northeast, but for a variety of reasons isn't being built. But it can be a more cost-effective typology because you're building a little bit more densely. It's not by any means high rise, but it's a little more dense. So you can make more efficient use of land and infrastructure, and you're also sharing walls. And they will, I expect they would probably be using modular or panelized construction for that. And so what it's testing really is, the use of pre-approved designs and municipal collaboration to streamline the approval process. It's testing just this idea of bulk purchasing. How will that work? And the idea when we say bulk purchase is to really be purchasing the same unit, but in lots of them. And so this will have some modest cost savings. It's not the larger cost savings that you would get if you were sort of doing a permanent standing order for a large number of homes, but you are going to be able to amortize the engineering and design costs across a larger number of homes. You design it once, and now you can, pay for it with 20 homes instead of 1 home, for example, or 30 homes. And, if you can sequence it in ways that fill in the gaps in some of your producers, it might be a way to help them out, and maybe you get a modest cost break as a result. I'd also test can we identify sites? Can we execute the pilot? So it's a lot of things that it will be studying. And the cost savings here will be a combination of the shorter time and streamlined approval process, so you don't have to pay for the time that it takes and the cost for that, and also the savings from a bulk purchase, which will be modest, but will hopefully be something. And if this works, hopefully the next step could be, okay, we tried it with duplexes or we tried it with townhomes. Now let's try a different housing typology and see if we can expand the number of successful examples. And then also to the extent that you can increase and regularize this purchase, you might be able to achieve greater cost savings. So that's, as I understand, H775's accelerator program. So now the Vermont program, this is a program that's based on a program that is being implemented currently in New York called Move in New York. And they are using manufactured housing rather than modular or panelized housing. And as I mentioned, manufactured housing, these are built in larger plants. They already have a lot of economies of scale, and they have developed some high-end products. For them, high-end, not high-end for the market, but for example, they have a cross-mod housing type that I'll have a bigger picture on the next slide. And they just did a pilot in New York looking at 3 of these cross mods, and they came in around $250,000 to build a home. That did not include the cost of land, but it did include, putting the foundation in and doing everything from building the home to installing it, and that was a fully ready home. And they're now in the process of expanding it. I'll talk a little bit about Move in New York in a second. And so this is testing kind of a different concept, but one that's very complementary, right? So they are testing the ability of high-end manufactured housing to provide attractive homes at low costs. They also will have site identification and effective execution things that they're testing. They will be trying to aggregate demand across multiple sites. I think that's something probably that H775 will be doing as well. And it's really important concept, and it's a little tricky, not impossible, but it is something you want to test, right? Can we find 8 places that want to put 15 homes, right? Or 8 places that want to put 10 homes, and what does it look like to kind of pull those orders together so that we can achieve a little more scale? I do think you're likely to see lower costs with this one in particular because it's using manufactured housing, but it's also more limited in the housing types. So right now they can do basically single family and duplexes. They won't be able to do some of the 2-story homes, for example, that you'll see in the offsite construction accelerator. And then, so if that's successful, the next step would be to say, okay, how do we expand our network of partners so we aggregate more demand and we could be building a larger volume, maybe get some more volume discounts and grow our utilization of the revolving fund. So 2 programs, both offsite construction, both bulk purchase, but really different enough that it's worth moving forward with both of them. I mentioned the Move in New York program. I want to just show again the picture of the home. This is a home that was built by a company called Champion Homes. So these are a cross mod home. As I mentioned, it cost about $250,000 all in. It varied a little bit. There was one home where the utilities were not where they thought they were going to be, and that cost a little bit more, but they were very happy with it. They're in the process now of rolling it out statewide. So they're inviting basically municipalities, and they have these institutions called land banks that have assembled parcels of land around the country, and they've negotiated pricing with Champion and with another company called Clayton Homes. And so they'll be doing a mini bid process. And their goal is 200 homes this year. I don't know if they'll quite get to 200 homes finished this year, but they're really trying to ramp up. So you can read this article. It was in the New York Times, and I'm happy to send a copy if it would be helpful. So really quickly, my conclusion is that the Offsite Construction Accelerator is a really important step forward. It will generate actionable learning and pave the way for future scale. So I really applaud you all for proposing it and the department for considering it. I would also underscore the importance of the proposed credit facility. It's just, you don't need long-term credit for this. It's short-term, but it's just a lot easier to do it in bulk rather than through individual loans. From what I understand, and you'll have to talk to the treasurer to know for sure, but my understanding is the proposed credit facility should be large enough to finance both pilots. I encourage you to think about that. I don't think you necessarily need a lot of changes in the legislation to accommodate that. My understanding is the Vermont State Housing Authority does not necessarily need state authorization to move forward with theirs. You just want to make sure as you're writing the credit facility that you're thinking about it as being able to fund both. I've proposed that the credit facility operate as a revolving fund. Not that you don't need grants, you might need grants too, but that's, that would be a kind of a separate thing, and I understand that the finances around that are more complicated. I see that you requested input on whether you need a statewide code. I think that's great, and I think you really should be thinking about this. Obviously, it's a longer time horizon, but there are a series of model offsite codes that have been prepared by the International Code Council in partnership with the Modular Building Institute. What they do really is kind of rationalize the process of developing offsite construction. So it's really clear what the state can do versus what the localities can do in terms of inspections in particular, and really provides a lot of common terminology. So a number of states, I saw Rhode Island just adopted all of those model codes, and would encourage you to really think about them as a way to make things easier. Because the more you can get inspected, the more you can do at the state level and get those panels sealed up so you don't have to do local inspections. It's going to save everyone time and money, and really just be better for everyone. I did have a couple of suggestions on technical fixes. I think when it comes to the credit facility, it's great that the treasurer has stepped up to run that. It would be important, I think, to coordinate with your 4 state agencies just to make sure that everyone's needs are met. So that would be the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Vermont State Housing Authority, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and VHCB. And then I did notice that the Offsite Construction Accelerator seems to currently contemplate a single municipality. I would think that you might want to allow yourself the opportunity to work with multiple municipalities. Great if you find one municipality that has enough space for 30 homes, but what if it's 2 or 3, and they each have 10? It seems to me one of the real benefits of offsite construction is they don't all need to be in the same place to achieve scale. You could really think about this as an infill program, as something that could be really helpful. So that's really all I have here, and I'm going to turn off my screen, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Jeff, this has been most helpful. I, for one, don't have questions, but do members of the committee have questions? Jeff, 1,000 thank yous. This has been most useful. Really appreciate it. We may be back in touch.
Great. All right.
Thank you. Chris, are you going to be representing?
Sorry, I have one very quick question, Jeff. Are you
Jeff,
still
are you
there?
gone?
I'm here.
Hi, I was wondering about whether your offsite construction factories were all in state or whether you used, I saw somewhere about Quebec offsite. Were you just referring to other successful programs, or was that one of your providers?
So I'm sorry if I didn't make this clear. I'm not a provider. I am
No, yeah,
I'm a consultant.
Your think tank. Yeah,
But
you're the brain
We're a
trust.
consultant, but I'm part of I'm here to help, if I can be helpful on any of the issues you have around housing. I have been doing this for 25, 30 years at the federal, state, and local levels. So the reference to Quebec had to do with multifamily housing. So as you start to think about, for example, apartments, how do we lower the cost of apartments so that with our the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, can finance more apartments with the same amount of low-income housing tax credit? So there are a number of different models and ways to think about that. And the reference to Quebec was to a program that the province of Quebec has established, where they put out a competition, and they requested that teams of modular manufacturers and architects propose specific designs for kind of small to mid-size apartment buildings that are being assembled into a catalog, and then municipalities will be and nonprofits will be given this catalog, and the province is offering to pay for the construction of these homes using the catalog. And it's a way to achieve standardization, because they're saying, we're going to build this apartment. You don't have to pick this one. You could pick a different one, but if you pick this one, this is what you're getting, right? And it's a way to contain costs. And so they had a particular cost structure that they were working under. Now, it may very well be possible for Vermont to access the homes that are in that catalog using those manufacturers, because there are some manufacturers in Vermont, in Quebec, who have historically been open to working in the Northeast. I can't speak to the exact status of the tariffs and all of the relationships between the two places, but there are manufacturers in Vermont. There are also manufacturers in Pennsylvania and in New Hampshire and in Maine that will all service the Vermont area. So you have a number of choices.
Great. And then my other question was whether if I have this right, in our bill, we're targeting the rural pilot program for communities that are under 5,000 people.
That's not.
That's separate.
That's separate. That has to do with the tax stabilization. This pilot
yeah.
is silent on, it just does say a municipality. It could say one or more municipalities.
Right. Okay.
And I
Any
think
other questions
ultimately-
for Jeff before we really let him go?
One last one.
Yes,
Sorry, I seem to have a lot of questions for you, Jeff.
That's fine, I'm here.
So the move-in New York, which was mostly manufactured housing, what we
Yes.
think of as single wide and double wides. It's a lovely home, way more affordable than a lot of other housing that we're talking about here, I'm imagining, right?
So
You, like, did we get a price of
Yeah.
what your
he said it's 250.
modular? No, that is this move-in cross mod, not
Yes.
necessarily the.
so
No, the
so
modulars are more expensive.
the short answer to your question is, I think of cross mods, I like to call them high-end manufactured homes, just as a way to distinguish them from your conventional single wide and double wide. Nothing against those, but they look different and they have a lower cost. And my view is you need housing of all types, right? We need a range of different price points to meet the needs of Vermonters at a range of different. So there's a absolute place for single wide, homes. We're seeing, the mobile home infill program is producing some high quality energy efficient single wide homes that are priced at a particular price point. The cross mod program is aimed at that kind of, the idea would be to produce homes kind of in the $250,000 to $300,000 range. And yes, they're a lot less expensive than other homes. I do expect the homes in the modular accelerator to cost somewhat more than that, because they're being built, with modular, and because you're not yet at the scale where you can quite secure the same level of discounts. But over time, my view is the goal ought to be to really try to, after you've done your demonstrations, when you feel comfortable, ramp up the scale so that you could be ordering a larger volume of homes in a way that gives a manufacturer the assurances they need to be able to sort of more permanently increase the size, whether it's Huntington Homes opening a second, line, or expanding their staff, or it's another manufacturer. If they knew that they had a guaranteed order every year of 100 homes, you would get a lot better pricing, in my view, than you're currently going to be able to get right now. And that would be the long-term goal, would be to find a way to say, maybe the state can serve as this aggregator of demand from individual municipalities or individual nonprofit partners or individual for-profit partners in a way that would allow you to sort of achieve greater economies of scale and greater cost reduction, so that maybe in the future, those duplexes and triplexes can get down to 250 and 300. So that would be the long-term goal that I would encourage you to be thinking about working towards.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Any other questions of Jeff? Yes, Tom?
Just one general question. Can you comment on the durability of cross mod versus manufactured homes and modular?
Sure. I can tell you what I know, which is that cross mod homes are built to the HUD code standard, just like single wides or double wides are. So it's the same minimal building code, but I would encourage you all to be asking for homes that somewhat exceed the minimum standards, which you have the ability to do. And in two ways in particular. One is higher level of energy efficiency. So the Clayton cross mods, for example, are all net zero ready. So that is something they're already doing, and Champion has the technology to do that. The other thing to think about would be to build homes to a higher level of resistance to wind and hurricanes. And the manufactured housing code has different zones based on the wind level risk, and the highest requirements apply to Miami because of hurricanes down there. But you have the ability to say, I would like a home built to the Miami code installed here in Vermont, so that you would be more resilient. So I would encourage us to be thinking about ways to use the cross mods to produce homes that are resilient to natural disasters, that are highly energy efficient, that are going to be a solid, excellent investment for decades to come, just like a single family home.
Just a follow-up question. I understand that cross mods don't depreciate over time the same way a mobile home might or manufactured home.
I think on the market.
For a first-time buyer that is looking to build some equity to move on to a future home, do they appreciate with the market the same as a modular might?
I don't think there's enough experience about cross mods specifically to say, but what the evidence shows that I have seen is that a manufactured home that is built on a permanent foundation and is treated as real property rather than personal property appreciates at about the same level as a stick-built home. So there are studies that I have reviewed that say that.
Thank
So
you.
I would expect the same level of appreciation.
That's good.
I was surprised to hear that, but I have now heard that.
If you have any other questions, please let me know. I'm happy to follow up with you on this or any other aspect related to housing. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear my testimony. So thank you.
You have another question?
I do. The question. I'm so
Actually,
sorry.
don't worry, let me clarify. Our next
Oh, yeah,
item is
at
at 11.
Yeah.
So we want to allow a little time for a break, but we could take another 5 minutes. So go ahead.
Thanks. Jeff, do you have any comment on the process for identifying sites? You know, it feels like we're trying to do everything all at once, right? We're developing housing design options and trying to release the credit and identifying manufacturers and trying to find all of the participants who would want to buy these homes. Do you have any better steps or how to whether our language has to speak to any of the desired steps that we should be taking?
Yeah.
The order or any other hints on that would be helpful.
My suggestion would be that be something that the sort of the groups that are operating the demonstrations figure out. That I don't think you necessarily need to figure this out at the state level, and it would actually be kind of cumbersome to have legislative language that was hard to change. And imagine you did it and you were well intentioned, but somehow you got something a little off. They would have to come back to you and get a legislative revision next year before they can move forward. I feel like you've made very clear that, you know, what you were hoping for out of this legislation, and it would be the department's responsibility to develop a plan that makes sense for selecting the design and for identifying communities and all of that. And I will say that you know the Department of Housing and Community Development right now, they're doing listening sessions on their proposed designs for Homes for All. So there's a lot of public input that's going into the selection of the designs. They are reaching out to municipalities already, even independent of this legislation, to develop agreements with municipalities to accept the designs. They already have a number of sites that they have seen that could potentially accommodate these homes. So I think what's great about the pilot, as you've proposed it here, is that it really builds on the Homes for All initiative and all the progress they've made, rather than something that's, you know, from scratch. And then on the Vermont State Housing Authority side, you know, I'll actually be working with them to develop some guidelines around, you know, how do you select sites and how do we find partners and all of that. And so I think that you've got two very capable agencies that I think would do an excellent job kind of administering these programs. And you certainly, as a legislative body, you know, obviously it's your prerogative to do whatever you want. But I would say give them some flexibility, but, you know, demand accountability, right? In terms of making sure that you get the report and you see the results, and that whatever documentation you want of the program's effects and learning, I think, you know, that would be great to kind of follow up on. So I think at the end of the day, both of these are just taking steps in the right direction towards aggregating demand and building the muscle memory around how to do this well. And there'll be a lot of learning from this that can inform future efforts, and hopefully at a larger scale.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Jeff, again, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, best of luck.
So it's a quarter of, let's reconvene, please, exactly at 11. Where what we're gonna do is just have a discussion about this bill and suggestions to council about things to add or change to the text. So it's not for vote, it's markup. And, give everybody a chance to sort of talk about it, think about it. Okay, and that's at 11. So we have 15 minutes before, yeah, Debbie.
I just want to say, we have Sears Homes in St. Johnsbury and they're
Yeah.
still standing.
Yeah, I think I lived in one of those.
I was in California, my first home. Let's go